I just can't disagree more with the idea that the Cubs need to invest a lot of money or a lot of years in relievers. It's a bad idea. Welcome into Northside Territory, Foul Territory Network's Cubs podcast. I'm Sahadev Sharma with my partner, Patrick Mooney. We're your Cubs beat writers over at The Athletic. Patrick, we are going to do part 2 of a listener mailbag. The listeners came in full force the other day when we asked for questions. They have a lot of them, and you know it's a common theme. Essentially, boils down to what's going wrong and how can this team get better, right? But
fix it.
Obviously, yeah, there are more specifics there, but yeah, this team has to get better, and we'll try and answer how they're going to go about doing that. Patrick, why don't you kick it off with the first question here?
Yeah, let's go with friend of the program, Michael Sarami, with our guy at Bleacher Nation, friend of Brett. Given the collection of top 100 prospects at AAA, is a talent consolidating trade nearly a foregone conclusion this offseason?
I mean, I think we've talked about this a lot, right? And I think it is, but I also think it's an important question, and I think it can't be brought up enough because, yes, I think the answer is yes. I thought last year it made sense to trade some talent. They did, and I keep seeing Zaire Hope highlights on Twitter. So Cubs fans probably are a little stressed out about that. But hey, Michael Busch had a great rookie season with the Cubs, so you can't freak out too much. Yes, you have to give up talent to get talent. So even talking about trading, like Zaire Hope wasn't a top 100 prospect. He may end up being one, but he wasn't one. There are positives from that. I think you can take the Cubs were able to draft someone in the 12th round or 11th round or whatever he was drafted and use him to get a highly thought of prospect who impacted the team. And he's turning into a good prospect. So who knows what that means for their talent. But to answer that question, I don't know how you don't make a trade. Kevin Alcantara is ready for the big leagues. Owen Casey's ready for the big league. Matt Shaw is pretty much ready for the big leagues. Moises Ballesteros is almost ready for the big leagues. Who am I missing? I'm missing
James Triantos.
James Triantos is almost ready for the big leagues. Cade Horton will probably be ready if he stays healthy at some point in the middle of the season, right? And that's just guys at AAA, right? You could Cam Smith. If Cam Smith is on the Matt Shaw progression, he's going to be ready
there. At Iowa next year at some point.
Yeah. So he's not far off. Someone's going to pop. They've done a really good job of drafting. I'm blanking on the pitchers that they have. Connor Noland and there's another one that's even better. Both of them got to AAA, I believe. So those are later round pitchers that they've developed. At a certain point, I mean, and then you're talking about guys that have reached the big leagues as well, right? You can talk about the pitching that they have at the big leagues, like Wicks, Ben Brown, Hayden Wisniewski, and whoever else I'm not thinking of that's reached the big leagues. Javier Assad, those are all young players, young under control pre-arb guys, and I think at some point you have to look at this team and say, where are all these guys going to fit, right? I don't always love that talking point, right, Patrick? I hated that during the first rebuild where it's like they have too many shortstops. No, stop saying stuff like that. Like you can never have too many of those, too much talent. It's how you allocate it, right? Like how do you use this talent? Is it and part of it is going to be trades. And I think they have to figure out who to target and who to move. You don't want to give up on the guys that are going to become stars, but you also need to move guys at what may be perceived peak value. It's a really difficult thing to do, I think, but it takes the right evaluation, internal evaluation. But I think I don't know if it's a foregone conclusion because I don't think this front office will just make a move to make a move type thing, but it almost feels like that, like they're going to be aggressive, right? In looking for this, and they'll be creative in the sense that there may be a move that we don't fully see, like we discussed last podcast, because we didn't see the Michael Busch trade coming, but they're almost certainly going to move at least one of those names that I mentioned.
Yeah, I think you're on the right track there.
I can get the next question unless you have more thoughts there, Patrick.
No, I think you just about summed it up. And honestly, I think we're going to be talking about this a lot this winter. I think there's going to be, James Trianto's rumor here, or like the race here, and putting together hypothetical trade scenarios. So I think I will table that for the next round of trade rumors.
Right. We have Twitter user RC75 Rocket wants a crosstown trade. He's asking, would trading for Garrett Crochet make sense? Then he's asking about the status of Ben Brown and his health. You got any updates there on Ben Brown, Patrick, and the possibility of Garrett Crochet coming up north?
Well, I think it absolutely makes sense to trade for Garrett Crochet, and I think there is almost a zero chance of the White Sox trading Crochet to the north side of Chicago. I think that is our understanding of the situation, right? I mean, Jed and Chris Getz are good friends. They're essentially neighbors. You know, they may have seen each other this morning at like school drop-off or whatever. Our buddy John Greenberg had that great column leading into Crosstown. So there is certainly a dialogue, but within that, I think there is like no expectation that could actually happen, right?
Yeah, I would put it near zero, if not confidently saying 0. Percent chance of that happening. I think I'd monitor that trade though. If the White Sox get a catching prospect, is that something? Now they have 2 catching prospects because they have Edgar Caro, I believe, who they got in a trade with the Angels, I want to say, is a catching prospect. And if they get another catching prospect, which is very possible, would they move one of those catching prospects? And then would that be something that they could, because they need position players, right? They need different position players. So does a catcher for outfielder prospect, catching prospect for outfielder prospect make sense? I'm just throwing out ideas, and I think it's something that, you know, could make sense. But that's why you monitor what the White Sox are doing. Who are they getting, and what kind of talent are they getting? And could there be a creative way for the Cubs to kind of jump in on that? But getting Crochet, I don't see that. That's almost zero, like I said.
And I think for me with Ben Brown, like, we got to see him throw in like a spring training game, have him get through that, see if he going to be like cleared to throw in real games next year. Like, this has been a weird situation.
He's supposed to be reevaluated like right around now, I think.
I think that would be a reevaluation. That's what Jed had said at his end of season presser, of being reevaluated right now. And obviously, you hope for news. He's super talented. He's a really interesting guy. He's like a real student of the game. But, you know, I think you get to a place with young pitchers where like the updates just kind of get old. Like, unless you're Kerry Wood, Mark Pryor, and like the team hasn't won the World Series since 1908. Like, those young pitchers at that moment, day-to-day, regular updates. I think with Brown, it's like, do your offseason. Let's see what happens in Mesa. Let's see, like, if you're kind of ready to go again. I mean, the Cubs have already moved on from the idea of him being part of their opening day rotation next year. I think it's maybe you stretch him out in Iowa as depth. Maybe he comes out of the bullpen. Maybe you focus on him as a late inning reliever. But like, until like games start again, I wouldn't like put too much weight on kind of any of these updates. So maybe that's me just being cynical. Let me get you one, Sahadev, from Matt Sewell. What arm and what bat do the Cubs absolutely need to add this offseason? A number 1 or 2 starter in Juan Soto would, of course, be my dream. But what's realistic? Where can the Cubs even add a bat? Catcher and DH appear to be the only current openings.
Yeah, and you're not wrong when you say where can they add a bat. I think that is going to be something like all of us kind of look at and say, like, where does this happen? How do they do this? So I think as far as free agents go, like I'd look at, I don't think Juan Soto's happening. I think that's not
no chance, Poppy.
Yeah, that one's not. I guess that one's not 0%, but maybe it's 0.1%.
Yeah,
just because we don't want to rule out something happening in the next month, or they're just like screw it, or like ownership gets involved somehow and says you have so much more money than we ever expected. I mean, looking at free agents, I think Santander from Baltimore makes sense, right? And also we have to consider, like, we don't know what Cody Bellinger is doing yet. If he opts out, that just makes it just changes a lot of things. And Santander makes a ton of sense, right? Like then Santander is a guy that you just say, like, yes, he makes sense. Are you willing to give up the pick? Are you willing to pay the price? That would be more. That would be the bigger question to me than whether he's a fit, right? And then you're talking about guys like free agent wise. It's like, okay, what are you trying to do, and who are you like? What other trades are you making? What moves are you making? Is Nico Horner still a part of this team, right? Is like, are you committed to Michael Bush playing only first base? Those types of things, and then you have to look at, like, is Pete Alonso a fit for this team, right? Are you just going straight slug and going to get like this power hitting established guy that can deliver home runs? I don't know if those things make perfect sense. And free agent wise, I think free agent wise pitching makes more sense. I don't think Corbin Burns is happening again. Like maybe, but it, like, there's so many reasons why. Scott Boras client number one, right? Going to be looking for, like, maybe not a record deal, but something just below the Garrett Cole and Yamamoto,
like a Strasburg-ish type.
Yeah. He's 30. His strikeout rate is going down. These are just trends that this type of front office, I don't think, looks at and says, "Yep, that's worth that type of investment." But Max Fried may be worth the risk. Someone like Nathan Eovaldi, an older guy who you can get at a shorter deal, who is consistent and like I and has done it in the postseason. Like those are some names off the top of my head. Like Blake Snell, I don't see it. He's going to be getting a pretty big deal. Like maybe, but yeah, I don't see that. Sean Manaea just is in the middle of a pretty monster season and a pretty good postseason. So what did David Stearns do there? He went and got someone that was undervalued, made him a starter again, and now
Manaea
he's
feels
going to get
a
paid.
year too late, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So I think they'll be looking for that type of thing, or just like I said, like Eovaldi makes sense to me, where it's he's not going to cost a ton because he's 35-ish. And then you look at trades for bats. When I think of bats, I like think of like just is Brent Rooker going to cost a lot? Probably, sure. But he looked pretty good when he played at Wrigley the last month, right? And you got to check in, just ask about guys. Like, are the Astros going to trade Kyle Tucker, or are they going to pay? Are they going to pay Alex Bregman and trade Kyle Tucker? They're going to let Bregman walk and pay Kyle Tucker? Are they going to pay them both? I don't know. But you got to ask. You got to check. You got to ask about Vlad and likely get rebuffed very quickly, right? and then there's probably going to be some name that none of us are considering right now. That's a good bat that hits the trade market. So I think all those things you have to consider and just be open-minded. I think a bat may have to come by a trade. Like I just have a feeling like that would be the route to get the bat. I just don't know. Like I probably didn't name the bat that they're going to go trade for. You know what I mean? All right, let's what's the next question here? This Tigers TS9 has 2 questions. Jed seems to have organizational blind spots regarding bullpen assembly, signing 5 WAR players or giving 2-year contracts to players, Mancini and Barnhart. Will Counsell challenge him to take more risks in free agency as befitting a team with a $240 million payroll? It's admirable to be able to fix a bullpen in season. However, undeniably, there is a connection between the offensive swoon and the bullpen struggles prior to and during the same time. I'm losing track of what the flow of that question. What does Jed need to do to ensure this doesn't happen again for a 3rd season in a row? I think he's saying like two seasons in a row, offense kind of disappeared and the bullpen struggled. It did both times. It did kind of come together with the bullpen. The offense didn't really disappear in 2023, in my opinion. It was pretty solid all throughout the season in 2023, but the bullpen certainly took a while to kind of coalesce there. I have thoughts on bullpen, Patrick, but go ahead and share your thoughts.
Oh yeah, I'll leave some of the bullpen to you. I would just say, kind of picking apart this question, which had a lot of good ideas within it. Like, I don't know if the bullpen is a blind spot for Jed as much as he's fully aware of like kind of how he's gone about this and doesn't really seem all that inclined to change it. The Mancini Barnhart types, I will kind of quote you, Sahadev, of like, look, every team has stuff like that. You're kind of going for role players. Those did not work out. I do think it'll be interesting to see, like, okay, now they have like AAA depth. Like, don't sign those guys, or like be good at signing those guys. I mean, we probably shouldn't overthink the catching situation or like place too much of an emphasis on that. Like, if you think Ballesteros can help and you don't want to get stuck with kind of a bigger Barnhart deal, right? Where it's like a guy, that won 1 Gold Glove and, has this great reputation, but like does not hit and does not get off to a good start. I think that's where some of this stuff can spiral. I think Counsell has already challenged the Cubs to take more risks with that great moment in the Wrigley interview room of just saying, there's a big gap with the Brewers. We should be trying to build 90-win teams around here. So I would expect that to continue to happen throughout the offseason. And then, yes, I'd leave it to you to kind of explain the bullpen strategy that I don't think is really evolving all that much. Although watching like Clay Holmes during the playoffs, I'm like, yeah, that's a guy they should probably sign and get outside of their whatever the Ivy system tells them to do. Of like, maybe he's not necessarily a closer in New York for, from April 1st all the way to the end of October, but he'd be a really nice piece in that Wrigley bullpen for a long time.
Honestly, like Clay Holmes was on my radar before he looked good in the playoffs, because he's exactly the type of guy that like, it's like you want him to, it's almost bad that he's having a good playoffs for the Cubs because you want,
we don't want him if they pitch well.
Yeah. It's like he's going to get too expensive now. But he's exactly the type of guy you should pursue. Someone that like had a quote unquote down season, but like his peripherals are great. His stuff is great. Like that's exactly, and Tommy probably has some idea, like to slightly tweak something about where he stands on the mound or something about his delivery or his pitch usage. And he has a great track record with that. Tommy Ottavy has a really good track record with that. I just can't disagree more with the idea that the Cubs need to invest a lot of money or a lot of years in relievers. It's a bad idea. I'm looking at the top bullpens by ERA this season. None of them spend big money outside of Atlanta on their relievers. Houston spent big money on Josh Hader. They had a lot of issues over the course of the season with their bullpen, though. Cleveland, awesome bullpen. Don't pay anybody. Milwaukee, awesome bullpen. Don't pay anybody. LA Dodgers, big money team, spends a lot of money. They don't pay their relievers a ton of money. Detroit, they traded all their, like, anyone that was, like, they had an awesome bullpen. Yankees don't even pay anybody in their bullpen. St. Louis, Ryan Helsley was locked down. They developed him. Seattle, they definitely don't pay anybody in their bullpen. Tampa Bay, like, it's just, like, those are the top 10 bullpens in baseball. They don't pay relievers. The White Sox, when they were about to compete, they decided to pay a bunch of relievers. Their bullpen stunk. Like, do not pay big money to relievers. If it's the final piece, maybe go trade for them at the deadline. Do not I mean, always, if you're competing, almost always trade for them at the deadline, right? Just do not give 3, 4, 5-year deals to relievers. It doesn't work. It very rarely works. They're just, like, I don't agree with any suggestion that that's the way you build a bullpen, because no good team does that. Good teams don't. Look at all these bullpens. And then I look at the bottom of the list, and, like, these guys paid relievers. Like, the one thing, like, I will say is, you know, there is, like, bullpens just aren't year to year guaranteed to be good.
Yeah.
Milwaukee seems to have figured something out, and Cleveland clearly has, right? So like, you just need to be a good at talent evaluation, and have some, your process needs to be really good, right? I do not think this is about money. There are other ways that I think the Cubs should allocate their money. I do think they should spend money. I do think they should be aggressive in free agency. I think doing so in the bullpen is a big mistake. I just think that's not a good allocation of, especially when they're not spending $280 million like the Yankees or Dodgers, who are spending more than that, right? Or the Padres or any Phillies, right? They're not spending as much as those teams. Do not do it. Like, they need to be better at figuring out how to get the bullpen right in April and May. Sure, but it's not, the answer to that is not spending big money, not in my opinion. I'm happy to listen to arguments to counter that, but I mean, just looking at the facts and the data, it says otherwise.
All right, I'm glad you're getting this question, Sahadev, because you wrote about it extensively after the trade deadline. It's from Cubs Bucks 84. Catcher seems like one of the easiest positions to upgrade offensively, especially from a power standpoint. What do you think a realistic trade looks like for Cal Raleigh or ShayLangers?
Okay, Cal Raleigh is going to cost a ton. I believe Seattle has a catching prospect whose last name is Ford. Don't know if he's guaranteed to catch. I don't know if he's ready to be there. This is a team that still needs offense. I mean, maybe they're willing to move him because they have Ford and then take bats in other areas. Okay, and then ShayLangers, very solid catcher offensively. I don't know much about his defense. Maybe average from what I understand. He's mostly, like, that's going to be just like power added to your team, I remember looking up at the board when the A's were in town and seeing his batting average, and I was like, wait a minute, I thought ShayLangers was having a good season. And then I looked at the rest of the stat line and was like, oh, this guy's just all power. And he's, like, I want to say he had 30 homers or was close to it. So
he had 29 homers, 80 RBIs, 224 batting average, 739 OPS, and that's kind of the first, I would say, full, above average offensive season that he's had in his 2+ years in the majors.
Yeah, neither of these guys are close to free agents. It would cost a lot. That would be the big deal of their offseason, their big trade of the offseason. It would cost, maybe it would be something where you build it around Miguel Amaya and Kevin Alcantara, and then more, right? Like,
And
so
pitching.
and pitching. Like, I think it would like something like that, because you'd need to replace their catcher with like a decent catcher, and you'd need to add more, and it wouldn't be just one top prospect, in my opinion. Like, you're giving up a catcher, and like Cal Raleigh, I believe, is up for a Gold Glove this year. Like, he's impactful. Like that. Like, I think he would cost more than ShayLangers. The one thing about Oakland is their evaluation of talent is very different than a lot of organizations around the game. So you may be able to like swing a deal where it looks like you're like, who are those? Like, those aren't their top prospects. They do that a lot. Like, they're unique with how they evaluate talent. So maybe there's something there. Either one would cost a lot. That's the bottom line. There was what was the other part of that? Oh no, yeah.
That was it. Yeah.
Yeah, no,
that's kind of the offseason, right? I mean, that question really sums up
yeah.
do the trade from
when I look
surplus.
At that, yeah, like Cal Raleigh, I just don't like looking at his numbers again. I think I may have mentioned his name last podcast, a couple podcasts ago. I was just throwing out names of teams that may be willing to listen. The more I look at his numbers, I don't see how you could trade a guy that's, what is he, 26 or something like that? Like, I don't know. That seems crazy to me. He's 27. He'll be 28 in a couple months in November. All right. I don't see Cal Raleigh being traded, but I could be very wrong. And it would cost a lot. It would cost a ton. All right. Here's one from, I don't know if it's Ramon or Ramon, but it's spelled Ramon on Twitter. I don't know how to really phrase this as a question, but what is up with the way the Cubs diagnose injuries, use the IL? It just seems like they could really help themselves some if they put guys on there and let them rest a bit instead of them trying to play through injuries. I think this question is interesting in a sense. Like, do the Cubs, is that any different than any other teams, Patrick? I think the bigger question is, listen, they got rid of their some trainers, their strength and conditioning guys. They're resetting strength and conditioning again. So there's something. Yeah. So I think it's, for me, and you can correct me, maybe you have a different opinion. I think it's less about how they handle the injuries and more about like injury prevention. What are they doing to get? Yeah. I think that's the big. I think this type of question for me is the fans that watch the Cubs that watch the Cubs and don't really follow other teams, because I think this happens with a lot of teams, and you also have to understand players have a big say on going on the IL. They do not, like, if this becomes a players association thing if you're just putting guys on the IL and they're like, no, I'm fine, I want to push through this.
Yeah, no doubt. I think what you're trying to say there of like how just local baseball is, you watch the same team every day and it just become like numb to it. And I think,
and listen, it's frustrating when a guy's out for 4 days with the same injury and you're like, why isn't he on the IL? I get it.
No, I think you're right in that. Look, some of those changes are already being made. I think I asked Counsell maybe in April or May of like, look, I know injuries happen all the time, but like, is the volume of injuries all at once of being the season like cause you to, does that set off any alarm bells? And he acknowledged, like, look, we don't have any answers right now, but of course you can't like ignore this happening and not question about, could we have done anything differently here? I mean, I will say, like, these strength coaches, trainers have just like the most brutal hours, like maybe in the game. I mean, just the sheer amount of stuff they have to deal with, and that's what they sign up for. But I think it's, always important to kind of just keep that in mind. And I also think too, like, the more I've covered the game and the more kind of talking with you, Sahadev, of like, there's kind of an art to this. And that's what it was explained to me, a while ago, of like just the amount of technology and data they have and the advancements they've made in that area. We think of like kind of doctors and science, like, oh, there should be this like hard and fast answer every time. Like, oh, if X injury happens and you're on the injury list for Y amount of days. And really, there's a lot of kind of triangulating here. And I mean, we talked about Ben Brown earlier, like Counsell, I mean, literally used the phrase opinions, like, seeking opinions on this and like different ways to go about a really unusual neck injury. So I think ultimately what we'll see is like what becomes of this high performance staff under Counsell, and also as the Hoyer Hawkins regime sort of evolves. And speaking of the Hoyer Hawkins administration, we'll wrap it up here, Sahadev, with handle is low at why don't you, huh? Great episode with Derek Gould on the Cardinals air quotes reset. Yes, editorial note. Thanks to Derek. Great information on what's going on in St. Louis. Back to the questions. But Cubs fans can tell Cards fans that air quotes, this is not a rebuild language, shouldn't necessarily be trusted. Are rebuilds fundamentally verboten in the current era? Is it all tied to TV money?
So I think that's I mean it's tied to TV. Is it tied to TV money? Listen, so I think it's interesting that
and ballpark attendance.
It's interesting that the Cubs are starting a new network right around that like it was in the middle of a pandemic. They start a new network, right, and then the rebuild goes into full force a year and a half later, right, and they didn't call it a rebuild. Does that have to do with the TV money? Does that have to do with fans filling up the ballpark? I think with the Cubs, maybe, but like they're going to fill that ballpark up for the most part, anyways, right? I think in St. Louis, it's really hard to sell the word rebuild. But fans aren't stupid. Fans weren't stupid in Chicago. They didn't think this was a reset. Fans aren't stupid in St. Louis. They know what it is. I think there's another factor that is really simple, but we don't consider that much. What player on that team wants to hear that? The players that are currently on the team don't want to hear you guys are going to lose win 65 games.
Don't tell that to Wilson Contreras, right?
Yeah, like they don't want to hear it's a rebuild. They don't want to hear like you guys are here to lose. Like imagine like that's. I think I don't know like how Theo phrased it, but like he did massage it a little bit, but he probably called it a rebuild. I think he said it in like flatly like that, but he also didn't say like these guys need to lose a bunch of games and things like that. The expectation is to lose right now. But I think they kind of said like we're building towards something. We have to do this to get to where we want to be. And that's a lot of what like Jed has said. Jed said before, and I'm sure the Cardinals use similar language. I think saying rebuild, yes, is it verboten? I think so. To a certain extent for certain teams, I think it is. In certain markets, it probably isn't, right? Like the players there and the fan base there just kind of know like this is what you get every whatever X amount of years. But like until they can prove that it's an actual reset where there aren't like 4, 5, 6 years of bad baseball or below average baseball, people are going to just say this is a rebuild. And look, it was a rebuild what the Cubs are doing. I think they're out of the rebuild phase. But I don't think you and I ever denied that. Did we ever deny that? I think we just kind of like said like Jed's not calling it that, but this is what it is. It is what it is.
Yeah,
like,
they refused to call it rebuild. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, how do you do what you did in 2021 and not say, and like, it's obvious. Like, yes.
I think that was a tactical error, kind of a messaging mistake. I mean, if we're going all the way back to that point, I think they should have. I think Theo was a genius at kind of articulating some of that stuff. And I think in that moment when Jed was like fried after that trade deadline on a Zoom, like saying like, I don't know what the definition of rebuild is. I think it was a quote like that. Like that was unnecessary.
Yeah. No, I don't disagree. I think fans like to hear like a very clear vision and a very like they just want words to like that they associate with what's going on. And I think rebuild is obviously what was happening. And I do think there's something to what I was saying about the players. Like, did Frank Schwindel need to hear that at the time? You're part of a rebuild. You're not going to be here that long. I don't know. Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe they just need to suck it up and play baseball. You're getting paid to play baseball.
There you go.
Play rebuild or not. I don't know. But it is avoided. I guess I don't hear it as much. And you know what? It could be partly because the league doesn't want to hear it. Like, the league doesn't really love this, right? Like, that they've probably like heard enough questions from Gordon over the years about how he's going to stop rebuilds. Rob Manfred's like, can you just get Gordon to stop asking me questions about rebuilding and tanking?
Well, the third wild card now too, like, the idea of building a team, if you're going back to when Theo first came here, of like, okay, building a team that can win 90 plus games and avoid us, now it's not that hard to build a team that is in that gray area of buy or sell at the trade deadline and could win 84 games like the Marlins and Diamondbacks of last year. So,
right. Absolutely. Nope. That the third wild card changes a lot too. Yeah. Like, it changes what teams are aiming for. And that's a whole other subject.
That'll be a future episode.
Yeah. Exactly. Thanks so much for the questions, everyone. Like, you guys make our jobs easier by having so many questions for us and making sure we have plenty to talk about. We're going to keep doing this in the off season. I'm sure we'll have multiple episodes like this over the next few months to get through the off season and make sure we're on top of everything you guys want to know about. Make sure to rate, review, and subscribe to Northside Territory. Subscribe to the YouTube channel and subscribe to The Athletic, where Patrick and I will be on top of all things Cubs this offseason. Thanks so much for listening. We appreciate all of you. Take care.